The more you talk, the less respect you command. It sounds counterintuitive, but in high-performance environments, this is a hidden factor behind executive presence, influence, and professional credibility. You may believe you're being clear, articulate, and persuasive, but what you're actually signaling can quietly reduce your impact. Today, you'll uncover a subtle communication pattern that shapes how people perceive your authority and how a small shift can instantly elevate your presence. Most people don't realize how often they weaken their own presence in everyday interactions. The moment they're questioned, they instinctively start explaining, adding context, details, and extra reasoning to make everything sound solid and convincing. On the surface, it feels professional, even intelligent. But beneath that, something shifts. The more you add, the less certain you appear. Because when your message needs constant reinforcement, it subtly signals that it can't stand on its own, and people pick up on that instantly, not through logic, but through perception. Your tone becomes slightly reactive. Your pace increases. You lean forward trying to be understood instead of simply being clear. And that's where the dynamic shifts. You're no longer leading the interaction, you're adjusting to it. In environments where confidence, clarity, and executive presence define influence, that small shift can quietly reduce how seriously people take you without a single word being questioned. To understand why this happens, you have to look beyond words and into how people interpret behavior. Because in any interaction, whether it's a meeting, a negotiation, or a simple conversation, people are constantly reading signals, not just what you say, but how you say it, how long you say it, and whether it feels grounded or reactive. And one of the strongest signals you send is how much you feel the need to explain yourself. When someone is truly confident in their position, there's no urgency behind their communication. They express their point clearly, directly, and then they stop. That pause is not empty, it carries weight. It signals composure, clarity, and control. It shows that they trust their message to stand on its own without needing constant reinforcement. But the moment you start adding more, extra context, extra reasoning, extra clarification, something shifts beneath the surface. What once felt like clarity begins to feel like compensation. Even if your intention is positive, the perception changes. Because over-explaining doesn't just deliver information, it reveals a subtle need to manage how your message is received. And that's the key distinction. When your communication shifts from expressing to managing perception, your presence becomes reactive. Instead of projecting certainty, you start adjusting in real time, trying to make everything land perfectly. And that effort, even when it's subtle, is what people sense. This is why influence isn't built on how much you say, it's built on how little you need to reinforce it. The less you depend on extra explanation, the stronger your message appears. And once you recognize this pattern, you begin to see it everywhere, in meetings, leadership conversations, and high-level environments where precision and restraint quietly define authority. This is where the real cost begins to show, because the impact of over-talking is rarely immediate, but it compounds over time. It subtly changes how people position you in their mind, not based on what you know, but based on how certain you appear when you communicate it. When your message feels reinforced too often, people start to engage with it differently. They listen less carefully. They question more. They look for gaps instead of simply receiving your point. And it's not because your ideas are weaker, it's because your delivery signals that they need support. In high-performance environments, boardrooms, leadership settings, strategic discussions, the individuals who command the most respect are rarely the ones speaking the most. They're the ones who speak with precision and then allow space. Their words land, and the silence that follows creates presence. It gives others time to process, and more importantly, it positions them as someone who doesn't need to prove their point in real time. Now compare that to someone who continues speaking. They begin with clarity, but then they add more and more. They try to anticipate every doubt, close every gap, and make everything airtight. But the longer they go, the more their message starts to lose impact. Attention drifts, focus fades, and instead of sounding more convincing, they begin to sound less certain.
This same pattern extends beyond formal settings. In everyday interactions, the person who constantly explains their decisions, justifies their choices, or fills every moment of silence often creates an unintended signal that their position needs approval to stand. And once that signal is present, people respond differently. They challenge more, they test more, they become less inclined to simply accept what's being said. Meanwhile, the person who communicates with clarity and restraint creates a completely different dynamic. There's no visible need to control perception, no effort to manage every reaction, just grounded, direct communication. And that shift alone increases how seriously they're taken. Because in the end, influence isn't just about what you say, it's about how your presence makes others feel about what you say. And when your communication feels stable, controlled, and self-sufficient, people naturally assign it more weight. Now here's where everything begins to shift, because once you become aware of this pattern, you gain something most people never develop: control over your presence. And the change doesn't come from forcing yourself to speak less randomly, it comes from needing less validation, less agreement, less reassurance that what you said was enough. You start with a simple but powerful adjustment. When you make a point, you finish it, and you stop. No extra layers, no automatic clarification. At first, this will feel unfamiliar. You'll feel the impulse to add one more sentence, to reinforce your idea, to ensure it lands perfectly. But that impulse is exactly what has been quietly reducing your impact, because every time you give into it, you signal that your words alone aren't strong enough. Then you refine how you respond under pressure. When someone questions you, you answer, but you don't defend. You don't rush to justify or over-explain. You respond clearly, directly, and then you allow space. That pause is where your authority is felt. It shows that your position doesn't depend on immediate agreement to remain solid, and that alone shifts how people engage with you. Next, you begin to set boundaries without turning them into explanations. You say no when necessary, calmly, professionally, without over-elaborating. Because the more you explain your boundaries, the more flexible they appear. But when your communication is consistent and concise, people adjust instead of testing it. You also start to use silence intentionally. Instead of filling every gap, you let your words settle. That space creates clarity, presence, and focus. It transforms your communication from reactive to composed. And in high-value environments, composure is one of the clearest signals of confidence. Over time, these small adjustments begin to compound. You become more grounded, more precise, and far more difficult to challenge, not because you're trying to dominate, but because you've removed the subtle behaviors that were weakening your message. And that's when your presence starts to feel different, more stable, more certain, and significantly more influential. At the highest level, this isn't just about communication, it's about identity. Most people believe respect comes from explaining clearly, proving their point, and making sure everyone understands them. But real authority works differently. It comes from being so grounded in what you say that you don't feel the need to constantly reinforce it. The moment you stop chasing agreement, something shifts. People begin to assume certainty. Your words carry more weight, not because you added more, but because you didn't need to. You speak with intention, you stop with control, and that restraint becomes your signal. Over time, this transforms how you're perceived. You're no longer seen as someone trying to be understood, you're seen as someone who understands. Your presence becomes calmer, sharper, and more defined, not loud, not forced, but unmistakable. So the next time you feel the urge to explain, pause. Let your words stand on their own. Let the silence do what most people never allow it to do, create presence. Because respect isn't built by saying more, it's built by needing less. If this perspective elevated the way you see communication, subscribe for more insights on high-level presence, mindset, and personal growth.